What does it look like when someone grows up on a remote Hawaiian island, learns to read the ocean the way most of us read a map, and then turns that lifetime of knowledge into one of the most unique cast and blast experiences anywhere in the world? Today's guest has done just that. Born and raised on Molokai, Josiah Ching grew up in a subsistence fishing family, learning tides, reefs, and the rhythms of the ocean long before he ever picked up a fly rod. After serving in the U.S. Army in Iraq and returning home, fly fishing didn't just become a passion, it became therapy, connection, and eventually his calling. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Josiah Ching runs Buck and Bones, offering something few places on earth can match: sight fishing for trophy Hawaiian bonefish in the morning and spot and stock axis deer hunting in the evening, all while sharing the cultural protocols, ecological history, and traditional knowledge that make Molokai more than just another island. In this episode, you're going to hear how bonefish move through the islands like ghosts, why local knowledge is everything, how conservation and Hawaiian culture shape every day on the water, and what it takes to build a high-quality, low-impact guiding program that the local community actually supports. All right, let's get into it. Here he is, Josiah Ching. You can find him at bucksandbones.com. How's it going, Josiah?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one today. I'm excited because we hear a lot about, I've been to Hawaii, a few times, and we hear a lot about a lot of people in our audience who are going to Hawaii and they want to go fish for bonefish or, whatever. And some people don't even realize that, there's actually opportunities. So I think today we're going to talk about that, where you are, because you're on a specific island as well, not Maui, not Oahu, but a kind of unique area. And then also you have hunting. You actually have deer hunting. So you've got this cast and blast, which I think is unique. So we're going to get into that today, help people get going on this, but maybe take us back first on fly fishing. Let's hear how you got into it. When did Bucks and Bones start for you?
Kind of a culmination of life and life experiences, I guess, in a nutshell. I was born into a part Native Hawaiian, born and raised out here. So born into a fishing family, not uncommon out here. It's a part of our lifestyle, subsistence fishing, not necessarily fly fishing, so always was on or in the ocean in some capacity. Grew up here, left high school right after graduation, joined the Army. So I served 6 years. I was a scout. So did Iraq, 2005, 2006. Came home, lived in Texas for a few years. I met my wife in San Antonio. And so we've been back out here now, raising our family for about 12 years. And kind of during that process, the time when I was away, my dad retired from his full-time job in telecommunications and started his charter service, and was originally doing like near shore bottom fishing, like tackle type of stuff, whale watching, that sort of thing. And then kind of out of the blue, after a couple of years, he had a guy call and ask about bonefish on fly. And we knew really nothing about fly fishing, but knew the fish, and my dad, just being a guy who he is, has, just a wealth of traditional fishing knowledge and that sort of thing. So it was kind of that situation where it was, I don't know specifically about fly fishing, but I know the fish.
Yeah, which is a big part of it.
It's just, kind of a big part of it when you're a guide,
Yeah.
And so he had that first guy, and this is like 20 years ago. So started from that, and then like a week later had another guy call and ask the same thing. And so he had kind of this light bulb moment. And so he just went on a deep dive, down the rabbit hole, trying to learn fly fishing himself, and then learn that and became known for that. And so after I came home, after, going to Iraq, like kind of not uncommon for a lot of guys of kind of that generation, I was just dealing with some little struggles, that sort of thing, and my dad knew and saw all of this sort of thing. And whether he knew it or not, he always makes that joke. He's like, I taught Josiah how to fly fish, and I saved his life, because it became a really, really massive form of therapy for me initially, just that Zen state that you can achieve out there, which is not uncommon. Like so many people say the same thing, right? It's not always just about the fish and the fishing. So that really was what grabbed me really, really deeply. And then, I started working with my dad beforehand as the deckhand guide, that sort of thing, and kept doing it and kind of fell passionately in love with fly fishing, the therapeutic aspects, and then and obviously the fish, the bones. And out here we call them eel is the Hawaiian word for bonefish. And for all the reasons, personally, it was just the hunt, the challenge. It's not easy out here. It's big water. It's a big ocean. It's a big fishery. It's windy. They're big fish, and yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just all of those things that kind of got me by the heart and soul. And now I just love sharing that, the hunt, the challenge. Before I started my business, I also worked full time in conservation
Hmm.
on the island for years, which is a huge aspect of it too. Because even in Hawaiian culture, we have the concept of Malka to Makai in our traditional land management systems, because they knew and understood, what happens on the land affects what's going on in the ocean. And so then working in conservation, I did a lot of native ecosystem restoration stuff, erosion control projects, all these sorts of things. You talk about the hunting, also dealing with these non-native ungulates, these introduced mammals who have in various forms drastically altered the native ecosystems, and the trickle down effects from that with erosion and runoff and that sort of thing, nitrate runoff from old agricultural fields causing like coral bleaching, turtles getting tumors and cancers and all these sorts of things. And so being born and raised in this place and then having the opportunity to live and spend so much time on the land and out there and then working on the front lines and conservation, seeing all these things and being able to connect all of these dots in like this big picture. And then so when I finally felt like it was time for me to start my business full time, I knew that I had to do everything that I could, as a Hawaiian, as a community member, as a human, to kind of keep all of those things at the forefront of my business. So I really do try and do everything that I can to educate all of my clients about the hows and whys, both culturally, protocols, different sorts of things, but also the importance of being mindful of our impact, and then the resource management. And even when you look at the visitor industry and that sort of thing, there are some people who are opposed to visitors and that sort of thing, and understanding it. It's a slippery slope, but I kind of look at that as a resource like any other. Needs to be managed. Too much of a good thing for sure. There's potential to kill the thing that you love. Sorry, I know it's a lot, and sorry if I'm rambling.
No, that's
Stop me
great.
at any time if you want.
That's great. I think there's a lot. You have a lot going. You've got the connection to the local land, the kind of the local community. Then you've got the species and conservation, and then you've got the connection to your travels and Iraq. I mean, we just had a thing this morning. We met with Project Healing Waters. We're putting together an event on the White River in Arkansas, and I've never really worked with Project Healing Waters too much. They've been on the podcast, but we're going to be doing an event where we're bringing out veterans to help kind of get them on the water. And just like you said, like it changes lives, fly fishing and just outdoors, right? So that feels like you're in tune with all of that.
Oh, totally, totally. And I've always wanted to be able to at some point get my business to the capacity to be able to get involved with some organizations like that. 'Cause, like, not just changing my life personally, I have several very dear friends who I've also seen firsthand impacts. Guys who are combat veterans too, who were wounded or medically retired because of being injured overseas and stuff. And it really is magical.
Yeah, it's amazing. And where you're at is, Hawaii is one of those places that, is amazing. And maybe talk about that. Like what island, where are you at, and how does that compare to the other Hawaiian islands for somebody new?
I'm based on the island of Molokai, which is one of the smaller, lesser known, less developed islands, which is not at all a bad thing. The community here has put in generations of some serious work in the sense of being very active in participating and having a say in what happens here on the island in regards specifically to development, whether that's, hotels, condos, resorts, all of that sort of thing, because they've just seen it. You were literally like in the middle of the island chain, and you can look across the Pailolo Channel and you can see new buildings on Maui, throughout your life, all these kinds of things. And it's tough, it's a slippery slope, and you hear the same story from small communities, I mean, around the states, really, but oh man, it was great. This was what it was like. And boom, 20 years later, it's this thing that nobody recognizes anymore, So has been very mindful of that for a long, 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 long time. The culture is still very strong here, the highest percentage of native Hawaiians as well. So a lot of people still are able to enjoy a very traditional lifestyle, subsistence, fishermen, farming, hunting, that sort of thing. And that's real wealth, that sort of freedom, that ability to feed yourself with your own hands. And so just understandably protective of that, and that also is an aspect of Hawaiian culture, and any small community I'm sure that you go to, especially rural communities, when it's immediately apparent like who's a visitor, just like, well, who are these people? What are their intentions here? What are they doing? So the community really, especially the Native Hawaiians, are not so much opposed to the fishing and the leisure industry, that sort of thing. It's just that, as it should be, right? They would want to see people go with people from the community, especially Hawaiians from the place, who can educate them about place and space, what to do, what not to do, instead of just having a bunch of people coming over and just trampling all over the reef.
Right. Like everybody going in having like, okay, Molokai's open and you've got 100 new lodges and outfitters,
A
and
1,000,000%. That is like the worst case.
that's what you don't want. You want the natural, what it sounds like you guys provide is the natural connection to the natural lands.
Totally,
And
totally.
yeah,
And like I think I have it on my website and my social media, the vision is high quality, low impact. Just doing everything you can to provide a legit experience. And I really take a lot of pride in not just being successful with the results of catching fish or getting shots at fish or harvesting an animal, but a legitimate cultural, historical, and ecological education that guests get when they come out and hunt or fish with me, because that's everything to us, right? That's why I am who I am. And so that's very, very, it's critical. You have to have that.
and that's how Molokai is set up. It sounds like you've got Oahu, like you said, you're almost a stone's throw away from Oahu. Maui is right there. You're kind of in between, and you've got those which are way built up, right? There's all sorts of stuff. You got, I mean, think of the history of Oahu, right? With talk about the military, Pearl Harbor, right? All that history, but you've got this really unique natural island in the middle where you're providing that experience. What does that look like for somebody coming in? Let's just say they were doing a trip with the family to Maui and they're listening now and they're like, well, how do I get this together? Is that an easy thing, putting this together if they're doing a trip?
Yeah, relatively simple. Well, we can elaborate on that a little bit too. That I've been working with a local ranch on the island, really amazing family, and so we're building the whole model now with hunts or fishing with lodging, meals, all of that sort of thing. Just building the whole all-inclusive models, because I saw that opportunity. I have some friends, Brian and Serena Kraft, who own Alaska Sportsman's Lodge. And so I was fortunate to be able to go up with my dad a few years ago, a couple of times, and that really kind of got me starting to scratch my head with looking at like a place for everybody, right? Because I would have so many clients come over and do exactly like you said, where family might fly in and they'll stay at like the Four Seasons or something like that on Oahu or Maui, wherever it is, and then he might fly over, or a couple guys will fly over for a couple days just because they're not sure like what's available. But it's quick. You fly into either Maui or Oahu, and it's like a 20-30 minute little puddle jumper. Right now there's only one airlines flying into Molokai, and that's Mokulele Airlines. So definitely plan ahead. Plan ahead. There can be some little logistical challenges and stuff.
Okay. What does it look like for, bonefish has come up a number of times, all around the world where we've had episodes, but specifically Hawaii is known for, sometimes people don't even know there's bonefish there, but there's some big bonefish, right, in Hawaii, if you know, like, especially off of Oahu. What does that opportunity look like for bonefish? Is it pretty good fishing? What do you focus on? Big fish, just catching a fish? What are your thoughts compared to other areas?
It's really interesting. Here, it's the largest fishery in the state, hands down, for sure.
For all around, not just fly fishing, but everything, because there's subsistence fishing, right, too, that people are doing on bones.
Yep, yep. But I mean, for fly fishing specifically, is the largest fishery in the state. So therein lies challenges in itself. I feel like it's a giant haystack and you're looking for moving needles. I have fish, other islands, caught fish on other islands, and just comparing things. It's really interesting, unique to see behavior between different islands, even though it's the same species. I would say, and I think a lot of the Hawaii guys would kind of agree that there's kind of a seasonal shift as you start to get into like the fall and winter months, where overall the numbers are going to decrease, but you will get higher than average size fish coming in. It's that trade-off. I mean, it's already a quality versus quantity fishery, and I would say becomes even more so that way during the fall and winter. Average day though, if you were to ask me, I think this talking to, a lot of guys who have guided, I haven't unfortunately been able to fish bones anywhere else, but I'd say average day here is probably getting eyes on about a dozen fish, shots at maybe a half dozen, and hooking or landing one or two of those fish. But our average fish is going to be 5 to 7 pounds. So lots of big singles, pairs. A big school of bones for us is anything over three. So I've had more than a few guys tell me that it's a lot more like permit fishing than bone fishing.
Patagonia just launched the next evolution in waders, and they're built for anglers just like you. The Swift Current line includes ultralight, packable options for the hiking, crew, and expedition-ready waders if you're hard on your gear like me. They're designed for comfort, built from recycled materials, and backed by Patagonia's ironclad warranty. You can check them out right now at wetflyswing.com/swiftcurrent. That's wetflyswing.com/SWIFTCURRENT. Swift Current waders. Check them out now. Since 1972, 4-Wheel Campers has been building rugged, lightweight campers designed to fit almost any truck and every kind of adventure. Whether you're keeping it simple like me with the Project M or gearing up for full-time off-the-grid travel, there's a 4-wheel camper built to match your lifestyle. You can head over to 4wheelcampers.com right now to use the builder tool to find your perfect topper, slide-in, or flatbed camper for your next journey. So what does that look like in the fishing? Take us there till you find, that fish. Talk about where you're fishing and then what's it like when you're seeing the fish.
It's for sure. I mean, like, this is the nature of the game, right? All tidal based. So I really like being out there for the full action. If you can get a high, the drop throughout that, and then fishing that at rise again, because the fish do move around on different parts of the tide on different days, has been kind of my experience. But we do a mix of both, and it's all dependent on what the conditions throw at us, whether we're fishing off the skiff or getting on the foot and wading them up, which is always great. Typical shots aren't always crazy long, but that also depends on conditions. I would say average shots are probably about 40, 50 foot range, even closer if you're sneaky, which is kind of my approach. It's always so windy here. I really, really, really like to close the gap as much as possible and get in tight. It's just been my experience that there's less room for error. You know what I mean? I mean, you can see the fish a lot better. You can read the fish a lot better. You can cast a lot more accurately. And then especially when you're guiding, I really, really, really try as much as possible to get the client to physically see the fish over just direction and distance, but it does get to that point throughout the day where you can determine whether this guy just has a really tough time seeing the fish, or if we just need to find the fish, right light, right bottom, whatever it might be. But still, you can't count how many guys you get fish to hand, and it's all just direction and distance. The guy never even saw the fish the whole time. A lot of variables.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's why obviously getting somebody local. And on Molokai, could you even go there on your own, fly in and try to DIY it? Is that even an option?
Technically, nothing is illegal, but I would say frowned upon for sure by the community, for sure. I mean, best to know someone for sure, whether that's a friend, family, someone, even if it's not. And I always say this too, I tell everybody, it's just not just to protect my business. There are other guide services and stuff on the island. This is just strictly desires of the community, and I just try to be as mindful and respectful of that as possible.
Yeah, I find that is and we just did an episode with a native Warm Springs reservation in our area. There's a big, Native American fishing. It's cool on the Deschutes River. Half of the upper river is all Warm Springs. You have to have a native permit and you have to get a native guide, and it's kind of a similar thing. And I was talking to him about it, and it's again, he sees things differently than a lot of people. He's talking about the same things, land and connecting to, all of that. And I feel like, that's kind of what you're talking about here. And to have somebody just roam in and be, disrespectful, and you find that in other islands too. I think just because of the history, right? You find a way to be respectful and not just that vacationer that's coming in with a bunch of money saying like, hey, I'm number one, right? I feel like that's a big struggle with. What's your take on that overall? Have you traveled? Do you stick pretty close to Molokai, or do you get out? Have you seen some of the other islands?
I travel a pretty good bit. Well, my wife, like I said, is from Texas, so lots of family and friends back there. I have some good guide buddies I fish with. I hire guys every time we go back, and I'm able to, but back and forth between the islands as much as possible. But I did Australia last
Oh,
year with
wow.
some really good buddies. It was a GT trip. We did a week
Cool.
with East Coast angling, a bit of fly, mostly spin, but still that was mental.
Yeah, GT. That's sweet. So in the other islands, when you look around, like for example, Maui, I've heard things that maybe the fishing isn't, I don't know, is it as good? Is it different? What's that like when you look around all the Hawaiian Islands? Because they're not all like equal, right?
No, different. Well, way back at one point in history, Molokai, Maui, and Lanai used to all be one island. And then kind of, plate tectonics or whatnot over time is split them apart. The Maui, and for sure, is more well known, right? All the other islands, I think, with more of the visitor industry, more of the resorts, all that sort of thing, are more well known. I have some really dear friends who live there, fish, and all it is just the size of the fishery here. We just have a much larger area of flats versus some of the other islands where they're limited in size, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I've seen it work in the sense of, like, the times I've fished Oahu, I've been very impressed by the numbers of fish you see during a day because they're forced to congregate in, like, only certain areas, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
there's the type of habitat that they want when they're coming in on the tides or whatnot to feed. So that can work for you, versus like what I was explaining earlier. Some days it can be pretty tough to find them when you've got miles and miles of flats to find fish on, and I haven't done it. And I've heard Maui is, I mean, there's fish on all the islands. It's just a matter of accessibility and the right conditions. I know a lot of the guys on Maui will do like the kind of pyramid lake thing where they get up on step
Oh,
ladders
really? Oh, wow.
and just do a lot of blind casting and that sort of thing. Not my cup of tea personally. I don't do any blind casting.
No. So this is all sight fishing. You're sight fishing for everything.
All sight fishing for me, 100% sight fishing.
Is yours for somebody who, let's say they really haven't done the saltwater thing? They've been fishing a while, but they're kind of not the best maybe caster. What's that going to look like? Are they going to have success if they book a trip with you out there? Or is that going to be a little challenging?
Obviously, I would say, like, I'm sure anywhere else, the higher your skill set is, the higher your odds of success. But I've had some very, very beginning anglers be successful too. A lot of that also just depends on the day and the conditions and the numbers of fish that are out on the flats and the amount of opportunities that you're able to get, right? I mean, if you get enough shots, you're gonna get the one fish. Yeah, it can get pretty technical, honestly. And I say this having cut my teeth out here. I'd never fly fish before I learned how to chase these guys. So I really had no idea what I was doing in the sense that, like, the learning curve was just like this,
Yeah.
But thankfully I had my dad to kind of teach me a little bit. And then the big basis I think for me that really helped me learn really quickly was that cultural basis and understanding of fish and fish behavior. But yeah, for sure being able to double haul it, punching it as far as you can into a good wind, seeing fish, reading fish. I really increasingly over the years and really coming to see that the area where a lot of guys struggle, especially when you're not able to do it a lot, is not so much casting ability or that sort of thing. It's trimming the fat. It's like making the shot quick, because we all know how flats fishing can be. It's like long periods of inactivity sometimes, and then boom, here's a fish 60 feet coming towards you. You got 5 seconds, make your shot. And so when I say trimming the fat, it's that it's not being lulled into that sense of complacency.
Yeah. So practicing. So if somebody's coming with you, lots of practice casting, just be ready to go.
For sure, being quick and being accurate, the more so, the better.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I want to hear this other part of it because you have, we're going to get more on bonefish, but you also have this hunting piece, which I think is really interesting. Cast and blast is something that we've talked about for years because we have our own cast and blast trip. People, I think, around the country, we have about half of our audience are hunters and they're fly anglers, right? So you have a lot of hunting. I've never seen a deer in Hawaii, but tell me about this deer hunting operation you have. And is that something you mix in? Like if somebody wanted to book a trip, are you putting that to get that package together where you do both?
I do. Yeah. I've had guys do it same day.
Yeah, same day. Wow.
Get out really, really early morning, harvest a deer, and then get out there and go catch bones, or vice versa, go catch a couple bones and then go out afternoon and evening hunt. And that all kind of started, it's pretty funny actually, going back is, it was like talking about starting a business for a few years, right? And it was actually a good buddy of mine, and he's like, man, when you get this going and you start doing the axis deer, because they're axis deer, which were introduced, I think, in the mid 1800s.
Oh, what are access deer? So these
native
are
to India, so they're those spotted deer.
Gotcha. So are they similar size to say like a blacktail or mule deer you'd find on the West Coast?
Yeah, I would say more like a blacktail, smaller than whitetail. Like a big buck is maybe 200. So yeah, they were introduced to Hawaii, I think 1860s or something like that, and now there's bunches and bunches of them, but have always been a huge part of our lifestyle growing up. Hunted them, and we've been hunting with my dad since I was a kid. And then eating these deer throughout our lives. Tons and tons of people in the community still feed their families on these things too.
Wow.
So yeah, it just kind of started from that, and it was kind of funny. I had a couple buddies talking about it, and they were like, "Man, you start doing this, you gotta call it the Big Buck and Boner package."
Right. There you
And
go.
then it was kind of from that when I decided I was going to start my business full time. I called a really good buddy of mine, and he was like, "Dude, it's Bucks and Bones time." And
that's it. Bucks and Bones. Yeah, Bucks and Bones rings a little better than the other one.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, Bucks and Bones. That's good. So, and are these animals, you kind of know, it sounds like you have that conservation background. Are they self-sustaining? Are they just out there doing their thing?
They are just running wild, completely free range. And there's lots of them. So actually, we always joke around that on our ranch, the only high fences are to keep the deer out, from eating the vegetables and stuff in the farms and gardens and that sort of thing.
That's amazing. So you have these animals that are 1860. I mean, you're going on 200 years of these animals being, so they're pretty much a kind of a wild species now. They've been out there so long. They're doing their thing.
No, totally naturalized, 100% naturalized. Yeah. And so that's kind of been one of the big motivators for us here. And the ranch that I'm working with when we started the hunting program was really just as management. So like our biggest hunt that we offer, and when we try to kind of push the most, is just our meat hunt. And that's just a doe only hunt. We run that year round, and really just trying to push that just to bring the numbers down a little bit to restore a little bit of the balance to the landscape.
So you can get a doe anytime, any month of the year out there?
Yep. They're not native animals, so there's no real seasons or anything. And we're hunting private property. So the ranch here that my business is partnered with has 16,000 acres total. And then they've got, like I said, lodging. I'll get you information on their website and stuff, but it's Pool Hoku Ranch. So they've got a lodge, they've got a couple of cottages that we use. So typical stay kind of for our guests is going to be them doing either a day or two. We do 1-day hunts, we do half-day hunts even. Pretty high odds of success.
It is. So you get out there, and is this rifle hunting mostly or bow?
We do both. Most of our visitors just coming in, kind of a lot of guys who do rifles because, it's quick, easy. I do rifle rentals. We offer full processing services. We ship everything. We have a taxidermist that we work with.
Oh, wow.
So trying to get all the bases covered so guys could literally just show up with the family and not need anything, bring your gear
and go home, and they can get even a mount, even shipped to them back, the whole thing.
Yeah, everything will be, meat shipped straight to the house.
Crazy.
So, and then the ranch also has different activities for the family. We've got horseback rides, and you can schedule yoga.
Oh, cool.
We've got lei making workshops.
So yeah, I'm trying to get a perspective on, For me, hunting, I mean, we just went deer hunting. We go every year. I went this year. It's funny because we've been on a roll a number of years and we got skunk this year. And it was one of those things where it's just, hunting where we go is hard. I mean, it's like we're hiking up tops of mountains. Once you get one, it's just a ton of work. Is this something where, what if they weren't hunters? What if they wanted to learn about hunting? Is this something where somebody could do that too?
No, totally. We've had a bunch of people come out and harvest their first animals with us. And so really open to being able to cater packages and the program to whatever people might need. We could do the full hunting 101 if people want or need to do that. And that's kind of one of the really cool things and unique opportunities we have with the program here, being able to offer a little bit of something for everybody, from your really experienced guys who can get out and really get after it while also trying to have some areas that are more accessible, a little less physically demanding and stuff, so you can kind of cover all of the bases. We've had some elderly clientele come out, some lots of youth hunters, kids coming out with their parents and stuff, harvesting their first animals.
Amazing.
So really, there is potential for everybody.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear. So you have that part of it, the hunting, which is, and then really you got the whole thing because you're building this lodge out. Is the lodge set up now where if somebody wanted to maybe even bring out the family, right? Bring out the kids, the family, is that an option right now or is that down the line a little bit?
Totally. No, that's all fully going up and running in operation right now.
Oh, cool. And do you do typically, is it kind of you pick a day or two, or is it mostly a week, or how does that look on booking?
It really just depends on what the guest is interested in. I would say for hunts, probably most of our guys are doing a 1 or 2 day hunt, maybe like a 3 or 4 day stay. Less if they're bringing their families or they're not bringing their families, right? If it's just a couple buddies coming over, they'll just do in and out kind of thing. And then the fishing also, I mean, always obviously best to be able to give yourself a couple of days if possible, just because, I mean, it can vary so drastically day to day. You can get out one day and not see a single fish and then get out next day and they're everywhere. So lots of variables there. But I would say kind of typically a lot of my anglers are probably doing, I mean, if they're serious, more of my repeat guys are probably doing like 2 or 3 days. But not uncommon to have single day trips. A lot of guys will hop over for the day. They're already on Maui or Oahu, didn't know about anything, found out about me or whatnot, and they're there for like a week and then they can swing it. They'll fly in first flight that morning, we'll fish, and then they can get back to the airport that afternoon and get back to whatever island they're staying on.
And it really sounds cool because I think that, like you said, you've got this. Maybe describe that when you fly into Molokai. How is it different than, are there the towns? Talk about that. Where are they staying? It sounds like there's a 16-acre property. Is that pretty much what the whole island is? It mostly natural, or there are some actual towns in there?
For the most part, yeah, the majority of the island is undeveloped. So you fly in the airport. It's kind of the central area of the island, and then you can pick up your car or rental, whatever you might want to go with. We can also arrange pickup and transportation if needed. And then just depending on where they stay, there's a couple other hotels and stuff in the island that the guys stay with, or if they want to come and stay up on the ranch, they can do that. The ranch is about 45 minutes from the main town, which is where we fish from. But if guys are hunting as well, it's not a big thing because we pick them up in the Polaris, like at the back door of the cottage, and then we go get after it.
Wow, this is great. Okay. Well, so you have the hunting piece. Let's take it back into the bonefish because I know, again, there's people going to be wanting to maybe get their first bonefish or get their first, their largest bonefish. Take us to, I mean, I'm guessing that seems like always a struggle. Like how many days? I feel like, we've done these trips where we've gone out for something and always thought, okay, we're going to hit this other species up in Alaska, for example. We're chasing Chinook. We're going to get our Chinook and then we're going to go chase these big rainbows. And what happens is you end up just sticking with that one species because it's like, oh man, you just want to get more of them. I feel like I would feel like that a little bit with the hunting versus bones. Like I'd want to just keep going for the bones. But what would be, you think 3 days would be a good, minimum? And do you think some maybe even stay in 5 sort of full week sort of thing?
I think 3 to 5 days is probably pretty perfect, honestly. And depending on what the guest is looking at. For guys who are obviously looking for more like trophy caliber animals in the sense of access bucks and stuff, you're definitely going to want to allow yourself a couple of days to shop around and look for them. On the big bucks get pretty elusive, so lots and lots of time spent glassing trying to find those guys. And then same for the bones, nice to give yourself a couple of days just in the worst case scenario, you run into a bit of weather or a, bad day of fishing.
Let's talk a little. I mean, you've been doing this. You mentioned your dad was the one that kind of got you into this. What has been your, in fly fishing? Have you kind of been teaching yourself? How have you got to this point where, you know what I mean? Like with, at this level of guiding, obviously. I'm trying to get like that learning curve of bonefish. How challenging has that been for you?
Was challenging, but like I said, because of my background growing up fishing and stuff, and the ways that we fish a lot, like other ways that were like sight fishing based, I'd say for sure one big advantage was that I never had a challenge seeing the fish, which is a big thing. So then from there on out, for me, it was really a matter, obviously, of learning how to cast.
What did you do with your casting? Did you just practice?
Yeah, just being a psychopath, basically, just hundreds of hours of getting out there. Because most days here by like noonish, it's blowing pretty good. I'd say like 15 to 20. And so every time I would go out and fish for a long while, I knew I was like, okay, I got this window before the wind comes up where I'm gonna have the highest odds of being the most successful. And then when it comes up, it's kind of gonna call it for me. But when that did happen, a lot of times what I would do is I would just start trying to cast like straight into the wind. And then like adapting my approach to fishing where I started to use the wind as an advantage instead of a disadvantage, So like I see a fish here, I'm not just going to go straight after that fish. And I guess also my hunting background too, right? Was thinking that like, let me just reposition myself, get upwind where I can be above this fish and now have the wind on my back and work with me. So lots of that sort of thing, and then just lots and lots of time casting, a little bit of the YouTube university. Every time I'd have a client come out who was a really solid caster, ask them for a couple of tips and tricks. And yeah, just doing it. I just love it. I'm actually like pretty blessed because I can rip a pretty solid double haul with either hand.
Yeah. Oh, you can both hands.
Which is yeah,
Wow.
which is a huge blessing.
Yep. Is that something you've always kind of had both hands?
Always been like somewhat ambidextrous. And actually initially when I first started fly fishing, I started out casting left-handed because I throw lefty. And so that motion felt more comfortable, but then I have like better fine motor skills, I guess, with my right hand. And so I started doing that for a bit. And then once I kind of got proficient with the double haul and everything with my right hand, I tried the left one day and I was like,
wow,
oh, this works too.
So depending on what you need. What is your wind? Because I have heard that sometimes that you can actually, if you know how to do it, you can cast into the wind almost as effectively out there. What are your tips there on the wind? What are you doing?
Line speed, tight loops, letting that rod load really well. I'm keeping that rod tip high, stopping. And then more and more and more so the haul is everything. You can wave that rod around as much as you want to, and it's not going to do anything if you're not doing something with that hauling hand, So it's really become those things for me, just the timing, the technique, and then the haul, stopping, that pause, let the line load that rod before you come back forward, and then on that final presentation, if you need it, just punch it. You cannot over accentuate that haul and that punch.
We've heard many of the stories on this podcast. Togiak River Lodge is one of the great destinations for swinging flies for Chinook, stripping for coho all day, and unwinding in a lodge right on the riverbank of the Togiak River. With access to all 5 salmon species plus rainbows, Dolly Varden, and more, Togiak offers a true Alaskan experience. Picture over 30 miles of river, seasoned guides, high-quality boats, and low fishing pressure. It's fly fishing Alaska at its best. I'll be heading up this summer, so reach out to Jordan and the crew to see what dates they have available this year. You can learn more right now at wetflyswing.com/Togiak. That's Togiak, Togiak. Alaskan fly fishing like you've always dreamed about. When it comes to premium flies that deliver results, Drifthook.com is the name to trust this season. Whether you're chasing trout with dry flies, swinging streamers, or dialing in those Euro nymphs, they've got everything you need. Here's a quick story. I was fishing a tricky spring creek earlier this year and nothing was working. Then I pulled out a Royal Wolf from the Drifthook box. I cast upstream, letting it drift effortlessly toward a holding fish. It was textbook. One of the biggest fish in the run rose, sipped the fly, and the fight was on. That's definitely a moment I'll never forget. Their fly kits ship free straight to your door, fully stocked and ready for action. You can support a great small business right now in this podcast by heading over to drifthook.com today. That's Drifthook, DRIFTHOOK. Use the code SWING at checkout to get 15% off your first order. What is your rod weight and length? What do you like to use?
I typically fish 8s and 9s.
Oh, you do 8 and 9, so not a 7. So a 7 weight's a little too light.
It's a little too light. You can get away with it. I mean, if you're a stick, or we fish some lighter winds and nicer days, I personally will do it. But it also gets to a point where like our average fish are so big too that you're kind of doing them a disservice by toying them around with them that long. So I like to fish personally a tight drag, 8 or 9 weight, and just kind of break their spirits as quick as you can and get them to hand.
And when would you go with a 9 versus an 8?
Probably on windier days, but I mean, 8s are great too. You can also overline, throw a 9-weight line on an 8-weight rod, which is a nice kind of happy medium. But you're really not going to be undergunned with either. Even the wind conditions, 8 or 9, you can still make them both work.
8 or 9. And line wise, do you have a specific line you like, or?
I use a lot of the Rio stuff, the Rio Elite series, the Flats Pro. I use the permit line more than the Bonefish line. I think it's just that shooting head out here with the wind and all that kind of stuff helps a little bit more. And leader wise, same, pretty basic leader setup. I fish like a 12-ish foot leader. I'll do just a 20-foot, 10-foot tapered, one of those Rio ones. And then Rio usually about 2.5 feet of 16-pound for a tippet section. So your total leader length's about 12 feet. And I like that 16 is just a little happy medium between, just a little bit of stealth, but also a little bit more strength because we do have some reef and coral and they are big fish.
That's right. So do you use the fluoro? Is that kind of versus mono, or what are you using there?
All fluoro.
Yeah, mainly because what's the biggest feature of the fluoro out there?
Abrasion resistance. For me, yeah, strength and transparency too. It's a lot less visible.
Okay. And you guys go typically, are you getting out on there in a boat?
Typically, not always fishing off of one, but more often than not using them to access the flats. Yeah.
Yeah. When you get out there on the flats, what are you looking for? If you're to a new flat, are you looking at, if you think about depth, structure, kind of all that, currents? Is there a lot to it when you're thinking about, you got the tides, obviously you want to hit to a dropping tide, it sounds like, in that range. How do you work that for if somebody was out there, maybe out there on their own in some other area, let's say just fishing? Do you have any recommendations there? Or what, how do you find the new water, the best water?
Well, it's interesting with bonefish because they're a transitory species, so like you could literally go out there at the wrong tide and think that they don't exist at all.
Right. So they might just not even be anywhere out there at that time of day.
Yeah, no, and they aren't here. That's the way it is. They leave the reef entirely and they go out into the deep water and school up.
So what are they doing when they go out in the deep water?
Strength in numbers, schooling up and
staying away from sharks and stuff
for safety. Yeah. Sharks, GTs eat them too. It's another big piece of the fishery that we have here that you don't have in a lot of other like classic bonefish destinations too, that I feel has like really altered their behavior out here too.
What's been the biggest?
GTs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And getting eaten by GTs.
Yeah. We heard that, and I didn't attend it, but one of our members in the community said that he was at the Bonefish Tarpon Trust event, which I think was this last weekend. And they said that I think it was I can't remember if it was permit. One of the species are just getting hammered by sharks. It's the biggest problem in some of these areas around the world. So it sounds like predation, right? Right? Changing environment and conditions and all that stuff. So it sounds like that's a problem here. Maybe not a problem, but a factor.
Yeah, for sure. I would say, like, I feel like it's probably the easiest time of their lives, but probably also the most dangerous, which is why they're so skittish, is when they're up on the flats feeding, because they're in warmer water, bunch more food, but then what also happens when they're in that flats ecosystem is that they have that third dimension removed, in the sense of, when they're being chased by predators, now they can't go up and down. They can only go this way. And I've seen it where like sharks and stuff will hunt them in areas where they know it's really, really shallow reef. And so they can corral these fish up into these reefs that they can't get through. And bunch of. I've lost fish. Like I've had clients tight on bones in that
Oh,
type of
no kidding.
habitat and had 6 foot black tips come up and just wreck them.
Bam.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Damn, that is nuts. So yeah, so that's part of it. So you have predation. You got these fish that, for the bonefish, they're traveling out in the school, so they're coming in to feed because that's where they can get the most food at a certain time, right? And then they go out. So that's kind of what you're saying. You're hitting them when they're in the flats because you're doing the sight fishing. That's your focus. So you're finding these really amazing flat areas, and then you're taking your clients out there, and you guys are spending what, like during that tidal cycle in that one area, and then moving to a new area.
you're moving around, bumping around the flats. I always say, for the sake of transparency too, just because of conditions and everything here, like our day, there's opportunities and chances when conditions will allow it for you. When you say a day, to get like a full 8 hour day, but our average fishing window here is like 4 to 6 hours on average, and then that's just because a combination of things are going to eventually force you to have to call the day. That's going to be like rising tides, which are going to start to agitate the water, winds, which are going to start to do the same thing. So a lot of days by like early afternoon, with that tide rising and those like 15, 20 knot winds building, it turns into the whole flat into like a washing machine. And then tide gets high, can't see fish leave anyway. So
But that sounds amazing to me because, you're in Hawaii. So it's like, all right, got my fishing in. Now it's time to kick back and relax or maybe do some hunting.
yeah, 100%. And trying to do it exactly like that, and it really, for guys who are coming out and visiting, it maximizes efficiency when you think about it in that sense too, because you could come out and do 2 days, but you could do both in the same day, each day. You know what I'm saying? Instead of doing a 1 full day hunt, 1 full day fish, you could, in theory, do like a morning hunt, fish, and then afternoon hunt again, or vice versa.
Yeah. Would there be another species that you could catch or hunt out there that you would add? You got bonefish. What would be a third one on the day?
Bones, we got GTs, we got bluefin trevally, we got milkies. Still trying to dial that program a little bit more, crack that. But I would say honestly, in the state of Hawaii, for shots at GTs and for guys to have opportunities to land when I say like legit, I'm talking like 40, 50 pound plus fish on
Uh,
the flats on a fly rod.
on the flats. So a GT on the flats.
Yeah, it would be here for sure.
You could do that. And that's put your time in. You would have a chance at that.
Oh, you're going to be investing your time. It's going to be hard not to touch that bonefish rod,
Right.
every time one comes along, because that will happen. But as I said, you're going to need that kind of guy who's a little bit familiar with it, has maybe done it in another place or something. But the opportunity for sure is there.
Yeah. You'd have to almost break it, like you said, day. Like day one is bonefish day, day two is GT day, and just focus. You have that one shot or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, let's kind of take it out here. I love to always have a segment to take us out. The conservation you mentioned. So I always say our conservation corner segment. It sounds like you have a lot of another life where you did a ton of conservation before all this. What does that look like for Hawaii? We've talked about that a little bit, of the bonefish, because you've got people that are killing bonefish, right? Because it's part of their, they've done it for thousands of years. What are you seeing there for bonefish? Are you worried about any things? Do you feel like populations are pretty steady there? Or do you have is there some work that you're doing or you've heard about that's going on? Or how do you balance that? Maybe might be the better question since you're kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like populations are pretty sustainable, or self-sustaining. There is a bit of gill netting still going on. It would be really curious to see what might happen in 5 or 10 years if we were to stop some of that, or at least tighten up a bit on enforcement and regulations. And that's always been one of the interesting things, the management perspective. I do think there's a bit that could be done. A lot of people still do eat them, especially I love it, dude. So the raw preparation, traditional prep is probably my favorite raw fish. But obviously I'm like extremely selective if and when I do harvest one. But understanding, right? I mean, people have different relationships with the fish for different reasons. There are people who feed their families and earn a bit of money and provide their families through that means. So that's what they feel is right. So, but I also always said, even for myself, as a Hawaiian and running a business and doing the guide service, that I feel like subsistence fishing should always come at the forefront in the conversation, and take precedence over recreational stuff for sure. I mean, you look at worst case scenarios like COVID and that whole shutdown,
I
guides
know.
all over the world and stuff were out of business, but you still have the resource there as a means of subsisting on and living, and that was my dad's mission. He always told us that growing up. My younger sister and I got a lot of the education when it came to the outdoor world, hunting, fishing, diving, gathering, all that sort of stuff. And it was always that being at the forefront was I'm teaching you guys all of these things so that nobody in our family is ever going to be hungry. You
Right.
guys just can't be lazy. It's out there. You just have to go get it.
Right. You got to work for it. That's really cool. Yeah. I feel like that's that's a perfect world. Like that would be great for everybody to be, because most people, in the country are probably getting their food from wherever, from the store, have no idea where the chicken's coming from, anything, the fish, Atlantic salmon, you got all these fish in the store. Where is that? So I feel like, yeah, you want to get to this place, and how do we slowly maybe get back there too, closer to that? And I feel like, yeah, COVID opened our eyes to be like, yeah, this is like stuff can happen.
No, totally, and then it's been very interesting too, and you see a lot of very affluent people making that conscious decision to return back to that type of lifestyle, which for us here has always been the norm, grow your own food, catch your own fish, kill your own animals. So it's really interesting to see a lot of these kinds of things that didn't always hold much weight or value in the modern
Right.
sense now being brought back to like the forefront, and so it's a very, very interesting conversation. But I do agree with that. I've always said that everyone who consumes meat, whether you decide you want to be a hunter for life or not, you should have a hand in dispatching or at least processing an animal so that you can make that mental connection, right? That Big Mac isn't just a Big Mac. It was at one point a living, breathing creature.
I know. I feel like for me, hunting, if it wasn't for my dad, I probably wouldn't be a hunter now. And he got me in it when I was a little kid, and I've always done it, for my whole life. And now I'm trying to get my kids into it, and it's the same thing. I mean, they see that bloody carcass and your elbows down, gutting it out. I mean, it's a visceral moment where it's like, okay, that's how it happens. The hamburger from McDonald's, right? The other interesting thing is with species, when you look at the Endangered Species Act, for example, a federal government, mandate or a, regulation that protects fish if they get to a certain level. So I think that might factor into this, right? Where you have these bonefish that if they do get low enough, maybe there have to be some other things that go into place. Do you feel that that's a valid part of this process where, because I understand you're saying subsistence fishing takes number one, and that totally makes sense. Do you think that what happens if you get to a point where the numbers are actually getting so low that it's impacting the actual subsistence? Or
Would be really interesting, but also really challenging, I think. I think the biggest hurdle would be enforcement, which is also really interesting when you look at like the Hawaiian culture, because at one point our ancestors had all of this stuff under wraps in the sense of having systems of management.
yeah, they were okay before, it was everything was working fine.
Yeah, they knew and understood the system, spawning cycles, life cycles, all these types of things, and it's just kind of been in it unfortunate that throughout the system, and decades that a lot of people have kind of lost that traditional knowledge, or at least the application of it, which is kind of tragic in a nutshell when you look at like everything else that the Hawaiian community has lost, right? And then you can't knock people too, right? I mean, you got to survive in the Western economic sense, and you need money to do that. So there's a slippery slope sometimes too when people will apply traditional knowledge in the sense of gathering and harvesting, but ignore the seasonality and the spawning cycles of some things, you know what I mean? And overlook that in order to be able to subsist in the economic sense. And I feel like that is where you really start to inadvertently do damage, right? Like you're shooting yourself in the foot when it starts to get to that point. But what you do from there on out is also really challenging too, right? Who does the enforcement, who does the regulation? And then people have differing opinions too, right? Who says how much is too much?
Yeah, it's a tough. We've been doing some episodes. In fact, I just had Nick from the Conservation Angler on, and he talked about steelhead populations, which, again, it's interesting because they go around the Pacific Rim. I don't think steelhead were ever historically, maybe they've been in the waters of Hawaii because it's in the Pacific, but steelhead have had some ups and downs for sure. We're kind of in this really interesting, but he talked about how they're trying to document specific areas where fish are spawning. It's very important because there's certain within each basin. So he's trying to get the word out to have people mark these locations, because knowing where they are, because fish, all the habitat isn't created equal. There's some places they're bettering, and knowing that and protecting that is important. Do you think in Hawaii, is the habitat a big part of this too? Not just the harvesting? Is there a chunk of habitat?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I would say so. Little environmental trickle downs and disconnects, and that's one thing that's really interesting in the Hawaiian culture and in the language. I mean, everything is in the language itself. You look at like place names and stuff that can tell you what a place was for or whatever. So if there's place names that like Keone O'io, which literally translates to like the O'io sands or the sands of the O'io, like bonefish sands, because they knew back then, like, that's where the bonefish are, for whatever reason. That might be a spawning area, it might be a feeding area, whatever it might be. But I really, really would love at some point to see some more serious work in that capacity, whether that's like tagging, telemetry studies, that sort of thing, because I would not be surprised if it were something like that, where like populations from the individual islands all intermingled and congregated in some other areas, for some like larger or mass like spawning events. Because we've caught fish here on Molokai that were tagged on Oahu, and
Oh,
that's like
really?
70 miles away. That channel's a couple thousand feet deep, and I bet you that fish crossed that channel on the bottom.
Oh,
You
right.
know, deep, deep water.
Yeah. Where are these fish spawning? Do they spawn in deep waters? Do they know where they're spawning?
It's kind of a mystery. Some people know. I mean, there's lots of traditional knowledge. You talk to some old timers and stuff who can tell you stuff that they've seen. The only time I've ever seen big congregations of bones has been in deeper water, either out like side the reef, 10, 12 feet of water or deeper, but you're talking like dozens and dozens of fish, obviously doing something because they're just milling around.
But that's how they're known. They're not on shallow water spawning
No,
like
they're not doing that sort of stuff like up in on the flats.
yeah, it's like broadcast spawning.
Yeah, in deeper water, probably like a couple 100 feet deep.
Wow, amazing. It's interesting. I think that's what's cool where you're at, because you're in this place that probably isn't as studied as maybe Belize and some of these other places, right, for bonefish. But it feels like probably a good part of their life history there, that area to understand might shed some light on them.
Totally, totally. And I also feel like that's kind of big part of the nature of the beast with the Hawaiian bones and why they are what they are, is because they're not sheltered and safe and staying in the reef on the flats all day. They're coming in, they're feeding for a few hours, and they're leaving, and then that deep water, man, it's cold, it's strong currents, it's
They got to be big.
big hungry fish. So the way I tell my clients and look at it is like every single one of these fish that's out there is like an Olympic caliber athlete. All the weak ones die. You know what I mean? They're all just prime physical specimens.
Yep. What's the biggest bonefish you've heard of out there?
27 pounds
27 pounds.
in a gill net, like back in the day.
No kidding. 27. And an average bonefish fishing around the world, what would be a good bone, typical?
Around the world, I mean, for a guy to catch a 10-pound plus bonefish is like world class for sure. Something to write home about.
You've seen some 10 pounders?
Oh yeah, yeah. I take fish at like 31.5 inches, like nose to fork. I
Crazy.
think bonefish tarpon trust their charts is a 26-inch fork length is a 10-pound fish. So if 26 is 10, what's like 31, 32,
Yeah, that's a massive fish.
13, 14 bigger fish. I know some older dudes who have caught like 19-pound fish, different
Man,
things. The state record fish, I
crazy.
think, is 16 pounds, which is wild because the dude caught it in like 120 feet of water on a whole bait fish. He was fishing for like snappers and GTs and
Right.
caught a 16-pound bonefish. So I personally feel once they get to a certain size, like 15 plus, like they don't even mess around on the flats anymore, because I think they completely change their behavior because they have a hard time finding enough to eat.
They're like a trout.
Yeah. is kind of like a theory that I have. Because you'll see them around once in a while, but I mean, they're out there.
That would make sense. Yeah, as they get to that bigger size, kind of like a brown trout or a trout, they start small eating bugs and stuff. And as soon as they hit that 20-inch range, they're like, okay, we're eating fish now. We're going for it.
Yeah, it would be really, really interesting to see and be able to document those types of behavioral changes. Because that's also why I feel like I was saying earlier, a big school of bonefish for us is anything over 3. And that's just because like our average fish is 5 to 7 pounds. I feel like they have to split off or they're not going to be able to find enough to eat during the tides.
Right. They got to go for it. What does it feel like for you, being where you are? It seems like you're in this place where, I mean, who wouldn't want to do what you're doing and live? Do you think about and you travel too, you Texas and stuff. Do you ever think about maybe down the line, Hawaii, you're moving to some other areas? Or are you in Hawaii for the long term?
Oh man, I like to say this is where my bones are gonna go into the ground. Been around, been traveling a bit, and but love it. It's here. Like I said, Texas is honestly probably second home. It's the only other place I've really lived for an extended period of time. But for right now and for the foreseeable future, it's taken me, like I said, a few years to figure this all out, get to this point in my life. But I'm happy here. I'm really excited to just continue to invest my energy and commit myself to hopefully building something people will think is special, and really trying to do it with financial gain and all of that stuff, not being at the forefront, really just trying to do it for all of the right reasons, being like, because I'm passionate about it, and understand the value of the conservational side of things. And then being able to, like I said, provide that educational experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have also on the conservation piece. And remind us again, what was your background, the work you did before?
I was the project coordinator for the Molokai Land Trust for a little over 4 years, and so
Oh, cool.
they're like a 1,800-acre conservation preserve on the northwest end of the island. So lots and lots of like kind of forestry related stuff, removing some non-native tree species, weeding, fencing, all that type of stuff, seabird monitoring, outplanting, tons of stuff.
You hear about a lot about climate change, not just for temperatures of streams, brook trout, whatever species, but also raising changes sea levels. Is that something that ever is a thinking like I guess we're thinking way ahead, but right, temperatures are changing. Is that something that you're thinking about, people are thinking about? You're on the Hawaiian Islands where you're at?
For sure, for sure. Sea level rise, all of that sort of stuff. It's real and it's happening. Whatever you want to refer to it as. I know that can be a touchy subject for different people, but we're seeing higher tides than we've ever seen in our lives. Those king tides that they're calling them now. And like, there's days you come in or go out, leave, and the entire catwalk is underwater. You're like liable to
Yeah.
have your boat float up onto the catwalk. But that sort of stuff never used to happen growing up. I swear it's hotter every summer than it ever was when we were kids. And even the seasons, they seem to just be shifting further and further into each other, almost to the point where it seems they're going to do that complete flip flop at some point.
Right. It seems like, yeah, obviously you can't deny it because stuff around the world, not just in certain areas. We have some of our editors, are in the Philippines, that are working, and they're having right now, man, they are having like warnings. It seems like every week on all the, not just monsoons, but the events. This is the time, right? Do you have much of that down in your area where you're
Yeah,
getting
we do. We'll get our storm seasons and hurricane seasons.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard. That's one of those things that it's such a big thing. You're sitting there thinking, okay, what do we do? That's always the question. How do you do something? And I don't even know if you don't really have the answer exactly, other than maybe connect with some local groups, maybe doing good work, right?
Yeah, be prepared, as possible. That's always what happens. I mean, every community just goes into full buckle down mode, every time we get that, and which is a challenge here too, because we got everything's barged in. So
Oh,
get one
right.
big event or
That cuts
something like
off.
that, man. Yeah. So stores will get cleaned out, and then like, yeah, also that becomes even more crucial, because we experience it and it's real out here.
Totally. Wow, it's amazing. Well, I think Josiah, I could sit here and chat forever because we haven't even got into your military background, which I think is probably lots of stories there. But I think maybe we'll leave it there for today and maybe bring you back another. Hopefully, we can get some people out to your neck of the woods, and I can maybe get out there eventually and visit you.
Oh, yeah, it would be awesome. Would love to have you.
Yeah, and I think hopefully this is inspiring people to realize, it's not, you don't just have to go into Maui or any of the other islands. We've got this other opportunity here. So yeah, man. Well, I want to appreciate is just say thanks again for all your time, and we'll be keeping in touch with you as we move ahead here.
Perfect. No, thank you, man. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
There we go. If you want to check in with Josiah's trips, you want to get into this, sounds amazing, right? Big bonefish, maybe some deer hunting. bucksandbones.com. That's the best place right now. You can also find them on Instagram at bucksandbones. I want to let you know if you're interested in this trip, check in with me. You can go to wetflyswing.com/pro. This is our pro community where we're leveling up our trips, making that great trip of the year, connecting with a community that's going to support you and get a bunch of great master classes and events along the way. Wetfly Swing Pro, check it out right now. I want to give you a big update what we have coming up this year. Some big trips. We've got, we're heading back to Togiak River Lodge. We're also working on a pike trip. If you're interested in heading up to northern Canada in Saskatchewan, we got that one going too. So check in with me if you have any questions, Dave at wetflyswing.com. I want to let you also know this is on YouTube. This is actually on YouTube right now. We have select podcast episodes that are going live on YouTube. If you want to check that out, you can do that right now. Subscribe to the podcast there. We're growing that channel, so would love if you would get your support there. And we also will be heading out on Spotify as well. So right now, if you want to watch the full episode, subscribe to us on YouTube. You'll support this podcast there as well. And tomorrow, right around the corner in not very long, in just a few hours, Mike O'Brien from Utah is going to be here. He's going to talk everything about Utah fly fishing. He's a guide out there near the Great Salt Lake. Don't miss this one tomorrow. Mike's going to bring his A game, and it's going to be fun on. All right, that's all I have for you. We are in the evening now here. So if it's evening, if it's morning, or if it's afternoon, I hope you're enjoying your day. Hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope to see you soon on the water or see you on that next podcast. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.